I've been able to capture some of these conversations, some of these staunch or hard takes about Louisiana. What is it that just gets people like arguing and like
Yeah, well, that's probably
back
like
and forth?
that's probably the easiest question to answer out of all of them about that topic of like, Creole versus Cajun and the difference in the language and the difference in the culture is that all of these people, whether they, regardless of what they identify as, if they're actually Cajun, if they're actually Creole, or of that ancestry somehow, some shape or form, somewhere on the timeline, they were oppressed. Somewhere on the timeline, they were oppressed and they had extreme hardships and extreme difficulties like making ends meet and like feeding themselves and taking care of their family. Like somewhere on the timeline, regardless of how you identify, unless you're just like straight up pure European or like white American, les Américains, like you had hardships, and that's one of the things that makes Louisiana really beautiful and unique is that a lot of those communities were getting along and collaborating and like making things happen and, collaborating with the Native Americans and the Indians and, sharing culture and sharing traditions and, sharing religions and also sharing recipes, right? And sharing music. But then you have these other moments in time, like with the Jim Crow era and desegregation and all that like started to undo a lot of that good groundwork that was done. And everybody remembers that. Most people remember that, but they remember it in very different ways. And if they weren't alive during that time, they were taught it in very different ways because of at whatever it was in that day and age, their ancestors were doing whatever they had to do to survive. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you identify with the lowest of low minority, which would be black, and then, depending on what side of the river you were on, if it wasn't a Creole ran area or region, it's like Creole wasn't that, being Creole wasn't that hot either. So if I'm somebody that's super, super light, even though I'm Creole, I may choose to identify as Cajun if it means I can get this, crazy amount of land, donated to me, to start my farm, from this guy or whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody was doing what they had to do to survive, but also a lot of people were trying to avoid shame, and that exists on all sides of the rainbow, so to say,
So through those stories passed down family lines and whatnot, if people are, I guess to answer the question, people are super passionate about this because their family went through this struggle and they have the way they were taught, or they had, whether it's like in school or, by their parents. And, I guess that's like their truth.
Yeah. It's their truth. And another thing I try to remind people of is that, because I get asked this question a lot and I try my best to be neutral just because of my position in the workplace and politics and all that. But, it's like, hey, like if, let's say, quote on, this is theoretical, but like, let's say my late grandmother said, hey, like we're this is our culture. This is what, she didn't say this is what we identify as. She said like, hey, this is what we are.
Yeah.
This is what you fill out on the census. This is what, if they ask you what you are in school, you say this. I'm not going to question her as to why. I'm not going to question her as a child to, assume anything different. And so that when you fast forward, 50 to 100 years later, and when this era of like technology and immediately an excessive amount of immediately accessible information where people are trying to learn more and they have the tools to learn a lot quicker than what we did just 2 generations back, people are challenging things that never once had to be challenged. They never even once had to be challenged, right? There was never an opportunity to challenge them. And who am I to go tell this person like, hey, I know you think that you're Cajun, but actually you really are Creole because X, Y, Z, and a third. But who am I to tell them that if it's their late grandmother that told them or taught them that they're Cajun in the first place and like all this other stuff? Mm-hmm. And their grandmother ain't here to defend herself no more. Like, you know what I mean?
Thanks for watching this snippet from AcadianaCasts Presents. If you like what you heard, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date on all the latest episodes of AcadianaCasts Presents and all the other stuff that we're cooking up at the AcadianaCasts Network. And to listen to the whole episode or watch the whole episode, you can check it out here on YouTube or on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. Your support means everything to us. It's the best and easiest way for us to grow. We'll see you next time on the latest episode of AcadianaCasts Presents. Merci beaucoup.